My name is Rain Mercer, 26 years old. I was ironing the only decent shirt I owned when my sister Brooklyn leaned against the kitchen counter with that fake sweet smile she saves for the moments she's about to casually ruin my life. The kitchen light flickered above us, buzzing faintly, making the whole place feel like it was humming with bad energy. "Big day?" she asked, swirling her iced coffee so the ice cubes clinked against the glass. I nodded, focusing on the iron's slow glide along the fabric. "Yeah, I really need this one. They said I'm shortlisted." She tilted her head, lips curving. "Shortlisted for a janitor job or an actual job?" I ignored her. I've been ignoring comments like that since I was 14 and realized that in this house, hope is something they like to stomp on early. Inside, I was anxious but hopeful. It was the first real interview I'd gotten in months, a logistics coordinator role. Nothing glamorous, but it was a ladder rung out of cleaning toilets at the community center, out of bleach-stained clothes and sore hands. For the first time in a long time, it felt like maybe my life was starting to turn. And people like Brooklyn don't like it when my life even thinks about turning. I heard heels dragging on the floor, the sound of Mom entering, already wrapped in the faded floral robe she never takes off. Dad followed behind her, scratching his stomach like waking up was the hardest thing he'd done all year. "You look ridiculous," Mom said as she poured cereal straight into a bowl. "No milk yet, just dry crunch." "That shirt looks like it belongs to someone with an actual career." "That's the point, Mom," I said quietly. "I want an actual career." Dad snorted, voice thick with sleep and contempt. "She wants a career," he mocked. "You scrub public toilets. You should be grateful anyone even hires you for that." Brooklyn laughed so hard she nearly spilled her coffee. "Honestly, Rain, you're adorable when you pretend you're not the bathroom girl." I swallowed my anger because today couldn't be about them. Today had to be about me, for once. I unplugged the iron, hung the shirt carefully on the back of a chair, and grabbed my bag. I double-checked the printed resume, slid it into a folder, then reached for the vitamins on the counter. Brooklyn moved before I registered what she was doing. "Oh, take this one too," she said, plucking a small yellow capsule from a tiny bottle I'd never seen before. She held it between two perfectly manicured fingers. I frowned. "What is it?" "A de-stressor," she said smoothly. "I take them before big days. Been using them for months. Really helps with the nerves." She sounded sincere. She even smiled, softer than usual. For the first time in a long time, she put a hand on my shoulder, her voice dipping into something that almost felt like sisterly concern. "Rain, seriously," she added, "you're shaking. This will just take the edge off. You don't want to go in there jittery, right?" I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, today she was on my side. That maybe she didn't want to be the only one in this house allowed to succeed. So I swallowed it with a sip of tap water. It tasted like nothing. Mom scoffed. "Look at her, shaking like a leaf over an office job. If she screws up today, at least she can go back to the toilets." Dad grunted. "If they hire you, the whole company must be desperate." I didn't respond. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me crack. I slipped on my shirt, tucked it in, smoothed it down with careful hands, and stepped outside into the cool morning air that smelled like wet pavement and faint exhaust. 10 minutes later, as I slid into the back of the Uber, I blinked. The world smeared. The street outside blurred like someone had dragged their thumb across a wet painting. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. "You okay back there, miss?" he asked. "Yeah," I tried to say, but my tongue felt thick, like it was glued to the roof of my mouth. My head was stuffed with wet cotton. I blinked again, hard. By the time we pulled up to the building where my dream job lived behind glass doors and polished floors, my legs felt like rubber. I stepped out and immediately had to grab a metal pole just to keep from crumpling to the sidewalk. Not now, I thought desperately. Not today. Please, God, not today. I forced myself toward the entrance. The lobby was bright and cold, with marble floors that reflected back a warped, shaky version of me. The security guard watched me with narrowed eyes. The receptionist's smile faltered as she took in my unsteady steps. "Ma'am, do you need water?" she asked. I tried to answer, but my words came out slurred. Even to my own ears, I sounded drunk. A chair appeared beside me. Someone guided me into it, hands hovering like they weren't sure if touching me was a liability. "Is she drunk?" someone whispered. "Hi?" another voice murmured. "I'm fine," I tried to say, but my tongue didn't agree. My eyes rolled slightly as I fought to keep them focused. I could see my reflection in the glass wall, my shirt still pressed, my hair still neat, but my body wasn't cooperating with the image. Cancel her slot, a clipped voice said near the reception desk. She's not fit to interview. Nausea surged. Humiliation burned up my spine. I staggered to my feet before they could escort me out like some kind of stray. I didn't even remember walking back outside. One moment I was in the chair. The next I was gripping the rough bark of a tree across the street, breathing like I'd just run a marathon underwater. My phone rang. Brooklyn. I answered with shaking fingers, pressing it to my ear. Didn't make it, did you? She chirped. What did you give me? I croaked. She laughed, a high, sharp, delighted sound. Just a little something to calm you down so I could show up clear-headed, she said. Guess who got a last-minute interview? My stomach dropped, vertigo folding in around my ribs. You what? Yeah, she said, smugness dripping through every word. They had an extra slot. I went in instead. They practically loved me. I might get the job by tonight. You drugged me, I whispered, pressing my back against the tree to stop the world from spinning. You're dramatic, she said lightly. I helped you relax. And who cares? You don't deserve real work. You're barely qualified to clean toilets. The line crackled as I hung up before I could say anything else. I stared at the building across the street, then down at my own trembling hands. By the time I made it home, my vision had improved slightly, but my body still felt like it was moving through molasses. I pushed the front door open. Mom was slicing cake in the kitchen like it was someone's birthday. Dad hovered nearby with a plate, eager. Oh, look, she's back early, Mom said. The company must not have been that desperate. Told you no one wants the toilet girl, Dad added. Brooklyn strutted in behind me, waving a pamphlet like a trophy. I got a second-round interview, she announced. They practically said I'm perfect for the role she pointed at me, tried to ruin. Mom hugged her. Dad kissed her forehead. They laughed and celebrated like Brooklyn had just won the Olympics. I stood there, still slightly dizzy, nausea rolling through my gut, and something inside me went from trembling to flat. You drugged me, I said. My voice came out low, steady in a way that surprised me. Brooklyn shrugged, rolling her eyes. Maybe don't be so dramatic. Even if she did, Mom scoffed. You deserved it. You always screw everything up. She just made sure you didn't embarrass yourself. Dad nodded. Someone like you doesn't get real jobs. Be grateful you have toilets to scrub. I looked at them. My whole family. None of them shocked. None of them denying it. None of them caring. Something snapped so loudly inside me it felt physical. I walked to the bathroom, closed the door, turned on the tap and splashed cold water on my face until my skin stung. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. Pale, eyes red, shirt still pressed like I was someone worth interviewing. They wanted to treat me like dirt, like I was disposable. Fine. Then they could face something that wasn't poetic or symbolic, something real, something with handcuffs and case numbers, something they couldn't laugh off at the kitchen table. My fingers shook as I picked up my phone. For the first time in years, I dialed 911. The operator's voice was calm, almost too calm for how violently my world was tilting. 911, what's your emergency? My sister gave me an unknown pill before a job interview, I whispered. I got sick. I couldn't stand straight. She admitted she did it so she could take my slot. And my parents, they laughed. They're celebrating her for it. There was a pause on the line. Ma'am, can you confirm? The dispatcher asked. Your sister provided you with an unidentified substance, and you ingested it? Yes, my throat tightened. And she admitted it. Just now. They all did. That is considered poisoning, the dispatcher said. We're sending a unit to your location. Poisoning. Hearing that word out loud made my knees buckle. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the cold tile floor, phone pressed to my ear, my other hand still wet from the sink. Within 20 minutes, there was a knock at the front door. Mom's voice floated through the hallway. Oh God, what now? The door opened. Footsteps. 2 officers in the living room. When they asked who gave me the pill, Mom scoffed. Oh, please, it was a vitamin. She's just useless. Dad added, she's been dramatic since she learned to walk. The officers turned to me. Where's your sister right now? The taller one asked. I pointed upstairs. In her room. They went up. I heard Brooklyn gasp, then try to laugh it off. I didn't drug her, she protested. I just gave her something to help her calm down. What exactly did you give her? The officer asked. A capsule. It was. So you admit you gave her a pill you can't identify, he said. Brooklyn's arrogance evaporated. Her breath stuttered. Mom stormed up the stairs, shouting that this was ridiculous, that I'm always sick and dramatic. The officer's radio crackled. Ambulance en route. Suspected drugging. Dad froze. Ambulance? For her? Yes, the officer said. Giving someone an unknown substance is a felony. They put me on a stretcher, wheeled me past my family. Mom rolled her eyes. Dad glared, like I was the one ruining everything. At the hospital, they drew blood. The doctor came in with a chart, jaw set. You tested positive for a sedative, Shy, he said, one that's not available over the counter. You could have collapsed, hit your head, or stopped breathing in your sleep. Whoever gave this to you put you in serious danger. Danger. That was what I'd been living in for years. I just hadn't had a word for it. The police came back with a notebook. I told them everything, from the iron shirt to the yellow capsule, from Brooklyn's call to my parents' celebration. When I finished, the officer closed the notebook slowly. We'll be making arrests tonight, he said. For the first time in years, I exhaled, not with guilt, not with fear, just release. My phone buzzed on the hospital tray. Mom, Dad, Brooklyn. All of them demanding I come home and fix this. I stared at the screen, the word poisoning still echoing in my ears, and realized something simple and terrifying. This time, I wasn't going to fix a single thing for them. The hospital lights were harsh, white, humming, too bright, but for the first time in years, my mind felt clearer than it ever had inside that house. The word poisoning echoed in my skull like a bell tolling, and even through the nausea still curled around my ribs, something fierce and unfamiliar flickered awake inside me. Someone was finally taking me seriously. Someone finally saw what they had done. My phone buzzed again. Another call from Mom's new number. I didn't pick up. I kept my eyes on the doorway instead, waiting for the officers who had promised to return. 2 hours later, they did. A detective stepped into the room. Older, steady, with tired eyes that had probably seen too many families like mine. He carried a clipboard and spoke gently but without an ounce of pity. Ms. Mercer, he said, we have an update for you. I straightened, gripping the thin hospital blanket. Okay. Your sister resisted arrest, he said. Your parents attempted to interfere. All 3 have been detained. Brooklyn, Mom, Dad. Detained. The word didn't feel real. It sat in the air like something too heavy to touch. We'll keep you updated on their charges, he added. For now, focus on your recovery. I nodded, but my mind was already spinning in a way that felt new, terrifying, empowering. It wasn't revenge, not even close. It was justice. It was survival. Finally, it was my turn to be believed. 3 days later, I walked into the police station for a formal update. My body was still heavy from whatever Brooklyn had slipped me, but my steps were steady, determined. A receptionist pointed me down the hallway. The detective I'd spoken to earlier sat across from me in a small interview room that smelled faintly of disinfectant and printer ink. He placed a folder on the table and slid it toward me like he was handing over the final piece of a puzzle. Your sister confessed, he said. My breath hitched. He opened the folder. Inside were printed statements, each page stamped with the station's emblem. She admitted she gave you an unidentified pill, he continued. She claims it was something she took herself, but she couldn't identify it. She also stated she gave it to you so you would calm down, and so she could take the interview slot herself. My stomach tightened, but the pain wasn't emotional. It was vindication, sharp and clean. And your parents? I asked quietly. They attempted to interfere with the arrest, he said, flipping the page. They're being charged with obstruction. I didn't smile, but something inside me unclenched, something that had been knotted for 26 years. Then he leaned forward. Now the question is, do you want to pursue a restraining order? There was no hesitation. Yes. His pen scribbled across the form. Hours later, a judge stamped the order. Just like that, they were legally barred from contacting me, coming near my home, my workplace, or even messaging me through third parties. For the first time in my life, the distance between them and me was not emotional. It was enforceable. That was when the begging began. Mom called from a new number. Sweetheart, they're treating us like criminals because of your little tantrum. Fix it. You need family. I forwarded the voicemail to the detective. Evidence. Dad emailed next. You made your point. Now drop the charges. You owe us. Owe them? For what? Surviving them? I left his email unread. Brooklyn, blocked on every platform, found a way to reach me through an old coworker. I can't get a job. They're running background checks. They see the case. Please ask them to erase it. I didn't mean it. Her message was frantic, full of the fear she had never imagined she would feel. Fear I had lived in for years. My pulse didn't even rise as I typed back. Actions have consequences. Welcome to adulthood. Block. The difference between us slammed into place. She expected consequences to be optional. I had grown up with consequences I never deserved. A week passed, then another. One evening, the detective called again. Ms. Mercer, we've uncovered additional information. My heart thudded painfully. What kind of information? He hesitated, a gentle pause, but a warning. We found multiple accounts opened under your name, he said. Credit lines, utilities, subscription services. Your parents and sister have been using your identity for several years. My mind went blank. What? I breathed. They used your social security number, he continued, opened credit cards, set up electric and Wi-Fi accounts. Some are delinquent. There are unpaid balances linked to your name. Something icy spread across my chest. Brooklyn drugging me wasn't the first betrayal. It was just the first they didn't get away with. You'll need to file fraud reports, he said gently. We can guide you through it. And I did. For 2 straight days, I filled out form after form, called credit bureaus, verified accounts, flagged identity misuse with government agencies, signed affidavits, documented every instance of fraudulent activity. It was tedious, painful, exhausting. But every form felt like stitching up a cut I'd been bleeding from for years. The system moved quickly after that. Accounts froze, investigations opened, collections halted. Within 2 weeks, everything they'd used under my name came crashing down. Their electricity was cut. Their Wi-Fi was shut off. Their credit scores dropped by hundreds of points. Their frozen accounts triggered automatic investigations. Official fraud notices flooded their mailbox. Thick envelopes stamped urgent response required. And not a single thing was illegal on my end. I wasn't ruining their lives. I was undoing what they had illegally tied to mine. They did this. All I did was pull my name back into my own hands. The strangest part wasn't the consequences. They deserved those. It was the shift. For the first time ever, they were powerless, and I wasn't. They knew I had started the chain reaction. They just never imagined I would follow it all the way through. The 3rd week after the arrests, I returned to work, my new job. The one I'd gotten because someone at the company had heard what happened and reached out. The one where my coworkers didn't mock me but offered help, support, and an office mug with my name on it. I was finishing a logistics report when security called from downstairs. There's a man here, the guard said. He's violating a restraining order. Claims he's your father. The words hit my chest like a fist. Dad? Here, at my job. For years, he'd told me I'd never amount to anything. Now he had to come to a building I worked in, just to beg. I'll come down, I said, but security insisted on escorting me. When the elevator opened, I saw him through the glass doors, face red, eyes wild, pacing like an animal caught between fear and rage. The moment he saw me, he shouted, "Rain, fix this! Fix what you did to us!" I stood behind the security guard, letting the distance speak for me. I didn't ruin your life, I said calmly. You handed me the tools. I just stopped dropping them. He tried to step forward. Security blocked him instantly. You're violating a restraining order, sir, the guard said. Leave now, or the police will be called. Dad looked from me to the guard, realization dawning too late. He wasn't in control anymore. His voice didn't command anyone here. His anger didn't mean anything in this building filled with people who respected me. I turned without another word. The glass doors slid shut behind me, closing out his voice, his control, his access. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't theirs. I wasn't their punching bag. I wasn't their scapegoat. I wasn't their source of power or money or validation or cruelty. For the first time in my life, I was free. The next morning, after Dad tried to storm my workplace, HR called me into a glass-walled office that overlooked the parking lot. Sunlight poured in like it had something to prove, and for the first time in years, I didn't shrink under institutional lighting. I sat across from my HR manager, a woman named Colleen, with soft eyes and a harder backbone than people probably expected. We've documented yesterday's incident, she said gently. Security submitted a full report. The restraining order protected you exactly the way it's supposed to. I nodded, hands folded tightly in my lap. Thank you for taking it seriously. Colleen gave me a small, grim smile. Everyone deserves safety, and you're not responsible for the actions of the people who raised you. That sentence hit harder than I expected. I blinked fast, nodding again. I know. And Rain, she added, we're glad you're here. It wasn't pity, it wasn't charity, it was sincerity, firm, grounded, the kind of validation I never once received in my childhood home. I left her office and returned to my desk, a real desk, in a real office, with coworkers who asked how my weekend was and meant it. On my keyboard sat a small note from my team lead. We've got your back. Someone had drawn a tiny shield next to it. It was so small, and yet it meant everything. 2 weeks passed without a single contact from my parents or Brooklyn, at least none that reached me. The restraining order held its boundaries like invisible walls around me, a shield I'd never had before. But the consequences they tried to outrun, they were piling up fast. The detective emailed me updates about the case. Brooklyn's felony poisoning charge was moving forward. My parents were facing obstruction and contempt. Identity theft investigations were expanding. Dozens of accounts tied to my name were under review. Government flags were placed on their credit. Their mailbox was now a graveyard of envelopes demanding repayment, verification, compliance. In my past life, I would have felt guilty. I would have blamed myself. I would have tried to fix it. But now, justice didn't feel like cruelty. It felt like air. With the storm held at arm's length, I started building a life I never thought I'd get to have. I found a studio apartment downtown, small, quiet, with tall windows that let in golden afternoon light. The night I signed the lease, I sat on the floor in the middle of the empty space, pizza box beside me, and cried. Not because I was sad, but because it was mine, every inch of it. I furnished it slowly, choosing pieces that felt like comfort rather than survival. A sage green couch, a thrifted oak coffee table I refinished myself, a lamp that cast a warm, soft glow at night, plants that sat in ceramic pots on the sill, leaves open like they trusted the room. When I finally moved in fully, I slept on a real bed, new sheets, new mattress, without anyone slamming doors, screaming insults, or stomping down hallways reminding me I was worthless. Silence. Safe silence. Healing silence. I didn't miss them, not once. A month after moving, the detective called again. "Ms. Mercer," he said, "the DA is offering your sister a plea deal if she accepts responsibility and agrees to probation, mandatory counseling, and restitution." "And my parents?" I asked. "They're still refusing to cooperate," he said. "Their obstruction charges stand. They're also under investigation for identity misuse." I exhaled, feeling the edges of something loosening inside me, like the final threads binding me to them were dissolving. "Thank you," I said, "for everything." "You did the right thing," he said softly. "Most people in your position never call us. You did." Maybe that was the real twist, that I finally saved myself. Brooklyn tried one last time. Not directly. She was blocked everywhere. But she sent a handwritten letter to my workplace. Security flagged it and asked if I wanted to read it. I hesitated, then nodded. Her handwriting was bubbly, dramatic loops from years of trying to make every envelope look like a birthday card. "Rain, I can't get a job. No one will hire me. My record is ruining everything. I'm applying everywhere and they won't even call back. Please, I need you to fix this. You're my sister. Please. Mom and Dad are falling apart. You're stronger. Fix it. Fix it, even now." I folded the letter, handed it back to security, and said, "Please add this to the restraining order file." As I walked back to my desk, a strange calm settled into my bones. Brooklyn wasn't sorry. She was scared. My mother wasn't remorseful. She was inconvenienced. My father didn't want to mend things. He wanted control back. But me? I finally wanted something too. Peace. And I was willing to protect it. Time softened the edges of the chaos. Work became a refuge. My coworkers became the closest thing to a family I'd ever had. One Friday afternoon, my team surprised me with donuts and a card that said, "Congrats on 60 days at your new job. Here's to more." They laughed when I teared up and pretended not to see me swipe a sleeve across my eyes. I wasn't used to people celebrating me, without conditions, without cruelty, without expecting me to fall apart. On a cold morning 3 months after the incident, I walked out of my apartment building, coffee in hand, and stood on the sidewalk, watching the city breathe around me. Cars passing, people rushing to buses, the smell of bakeries opening for the day. A soft warmth bloomed in my chest. This is what freedom looks like. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, quiet, mine. I still heard about my family sometimes, from a neighbor who used to live near my parents, or from updates forwarded by the detective. Their electricity had been restored only after lengthy payment plans. Their credit was still frozen. Brooklyn was working part-time at a fast food restaurant because it was the only place that didn't background check thoroughly. My parents had to downsize to a smaller home after creditors hounded them. Their world collapsed piece by piece, not because I destroyed it, but because I stopped holding it up. One evening, after a long day at work, I walked into my apartment, tossed my keys into a bowl by the door, and set my grocery bag on the counter. The golden glow of the lamp lit the room with soft shadows. A gentle peace settled over everything. I didn't jump at footsteps. I didn't brace for insults. I didn't swallow fear with every breath. I was alone, safe, home. I sat on the couch, tucking my legs beneath me, and opened my laptop to check what the detective had emailed earlier. A simple subject line. Case update, finalized. I took a deep breath and clicked. Brooklyn accepted the plea. Probation, mandatory counseling, permanent record. My parents' obstruction charges were upheld. They were fined, flagged, legally barred from contacting me for years. No apologies, no tears, just consequences. Finally landing where they belonged. I leaned back against the couch, closing my eyes, letting the knowledge sink in. I wasn't the broken one. I wasn't the failure. I wasn't the burden. I was the survivor. The one who finally stopped trying to fix people who wanted me destroyed. For the first time in my life, I exhaled without guilt. I wasn't their scapegoat, punching bag, or possession anymore. I was Rain Mercer, free, whole, and building a life that they would never again have the power to touch.